So let's make an adapter for a Terraphone Intercom to either a Peltor helmet, which this one is, or a different version which will have a cord end which will go to a Stilo helmet. So the parts that we're going to need for this is a 1/4 inch stereo connector, NTE 123 AP op amp, 220 nanofarad capacitor, and a 470k ohm resistor, a little bit of hookup wire, and some patience. Once it's all assembled, some epoxy and something to mold with will be good. So let's get into it. So this op amp circuit is the first thing that we're going to make. It allows you to use a dynamic microphone such as you find in a Peltor or a Stilo helmet with an intercom that's expecting an electric type microphone signal, which is a powered bias microphone. So we'll get into assembling this, and then we'll get into the connection points onto the 1/4 inch and the variants that you can make for a Peltor or for a Stilo helmet. So the first thing we'll do is we'll take the transistor, and the flat side that's facing up, we'll fold the collector back onto itself. And the emitter, I will fold the opposite direction. Then with that, I will take a resistor. That resistor I'm going to wrap around the base. And the capacitor, I'll just do the same. So one of the key things here is that when we solder it, we want to make sure that we're not going to produce any kind of short in between. And then we'll trim this back a little bit further. So now that this is soldered on, we've got the resistor and the capacitor on the base, making sure that we have no shorts between the two with the other pins. And then this will be inside of our connector. Next up, I take the connector and I'll trim off the strain relief on this connector. We won't be needing it for a majority of the length. We'll solder onto the back side of it, so we'll trim that off. For our connection, and how we'll position this is so that we have a good, nice, tight connection with the op amp nestled inside of the connector. So we'll solder these two connections on here, and then afterwards we'll do the base. Okay, so we have our connectors all done for the Terraphone Intercom side of things. So the pinout for this is the tip here, which is this red wire that I soldered. That one is going to go to the speaker of the helmet. Different pin for a Stilo or a Peltor. The base, which is this here, is a ground, which I have a black wire soldered to. And the microphone circuit goes through the op amp and it goes to the ring 1. So this will be our connection for our microphone through the capacitor. Again, this will be a different pin depending on if it's a Peltor or a Stilo helmet. So let's prep that side of it. So for this connector for a Peltor, what I did is I cut the strain relief off the back of the TJ101, and that allows me to get a nice tight and compact adapter. I use a little mold that I make, but there's other ways of doing this. So once this is all soldered together, I'll have this inside of a mold and I'll put my cover on top of it and I'll pour epoxy into this cavity. I'll let it harden and then I'll just machine off the excess and put a heat shrink tubing over top. You can do it without a mold. When I first started making them, I would take the back shell for the connector itself and I would cut a hole in it, put some kind of mold release inside, like a wax or Teflon type spray. Assemble this all together with the back shell over top of everything, seal off the front side, and just pour epoxy into it. Once it hardened, I would cut off the shell. So here's the assembled connector. So we've got the tip here, which is this red wire, which is going to go to terminal number 3 of the Nexus connector. The other side of the capacitor here goes to terminal 1, which is your microphone on a Peltor. And then the base is going to be going to 2 terminals. It goes to terminal number 2 and to terminal number 4. So I'll give you a slow little rotation. So it is, fairly compact, but once you assemble the stereo connector with the op amp, it's pretty easy just to reroute the wiring as you need. And my recommendation is before you epoxy anything, just make sure you take a look around to make sure there's no shorts, and ideally test it before you fill it. So I'll now position this inside of my mold. I'll assemble my mold together, and this allows me to pour epoxy directly into it and let it harden. 5-minute epoxy, and we'll be good. So the alternate version to this adapter is one for a Stilo helmet, a WRC helmet. So we'll use the TP101 plug. I'm using a microphone cable, which is a shielded 2-conductor cable. It's nice and pliable. I use about 6 inches of this wire, and we'll solder it to the circuit side of the stereo plug. And of course to the other side. Now this circuit could be adapted for the Stilo Trophy helmet as opposed to the Terraphone, which is just different pinouts. It would be the same amplifier circuit, but wired differently. So there's no reason that shouldn't work. So we'll get into it. So for the Stilo connection, it's actually fairly easy and a good strain relief. Is the shielding on the cable is going to go to pin number 1, which is the tip, and the strain relief. So I soldered it straight to the base here, and then I bent down terminal number 3 and soldered it directly to the base. So because this setup has a common microphone and speaker negative terminal, we can do that. And then arbitrarily, I'm using my blue wire for pin number 4, which on a Stilo helmet is microphone, and then my white wire I'm using onto pin number 2, which is the speaker side of it. So this will get a back shell onto it, some heat shrink afterwards, and then these connections will go onto our amplifier. So I've tested the adapter, and now everything's ready for assembly. What I'm going to use is some 5-minute fast set epoxy. Just mix it up on disposable something or other. I'm going to fill this particular connector in place and then put this back shell on and tighten it up. That way I get some nice coverage throughout the circuit, gives it a bit more strain relief and pressure. This one's pretty good because the outside shielded shell of this is connected directly to the base strain relief as well as the strain relief on the plug. So, this is a pretty stiff connection anyways, but epoxy is just going to make sure nothing moves around and we don't have any shorts that we're not expecting. And then we'll put some heat shrink on with some glue again and put some labels on it, and this will be good to go.